Einstein has never been to Philadelphia. The question is first and foremost, what is the hypothesis to explain the Philadelphia experiment? And it is that the experiment used disinformation to confuse the Germans about the Manhattan Project and its true purpose. And its true purpose was an experiment designed to test Einstein's theory of relativity. Except that Einstein has never even been to Philadelphia, and the Eldridge was stationed in New York. It was never in Philadelphia. The Germans never mentioned Philadelphia in their intelligence, except they wanted to destroy a Light factory, and it is an alloy of aluminium, and it is also sodium. If it was CIA disinformation to confuse Germany about the bomb, then it would be found in secret German bomb files, which are not declassified, and they would be declassified if they were disinformation meant for foreign powers like the Russians, and the Russians do not have a secret project called Philadelphia 2 hash, and if they did have such a project, the disinformation would have been a success. But maybe Russia realized it was a lie, and they might have revealed the truth about the atomic bomb, which they did in fact discover. So maybe they understood the role Einstein's unified field theory had to play in the atomic bomb. Or maybe the Philadelphia experiment was a lie that came much later, and maybe it had nothing to do with the CIA. It was just that it began as a lie, and like Pinocchio's nose just grew longer and longer. But maybe the CIA used it as an example of their disinformation campaign. Certainly Stanley mixed it with alien spaceships and physics from another world, and he was supposed to be CIA. But when a person is a liar, you cannot believe anything they say, even if they say they're CIA. Conclusion: there was something called the Philadelphia experiment, which may not have even been in Philadelphia, that was covered up. But due to the disinformation and downright lies, we may never know just what that something was. The book gives the answer to why they would tell such a terrible lie, but the answer is not good enough. It is not easy to start with a lie and find the truth. You have to start with the truth to find lies. The Philadelphia experiment is based on a primary source document, the Barrow edition of the case for the UFO. The book was supposed to be given to the owner by Land when Jessup distanced himself from this delusional man. But the fact that they contracted Maurice Jessup means they saw the book as an opportunity for disinformation that would cover the truth of some of the Navy's own experiments, that whatever they might have involved, perhaps Einstein and nuclear torpedoes. Whatever it was, this was where the CIA took over this whole business. Jessup on his death was going to expose the Philadelphia experiment. Maybe they were a role in the creation of the Barrow version. Someone has mentioned that the case for the UFO was a better read, without the crazy notions. Jessup seems to be the one the owner wanted to discredit. Maybe the government of the day believed that UFOs were real and wanted to suppress Jessup's book. Which may explain why his publisher did not want another book. Which led to his depression and eventual suicide. Maybe he did not jump, he was pushed, and that means it is a case of whodunit. Someone killed Jessup, probably the owner, so they could tell lies about the Philadelphia experiment without him exposing it all as a hoax. That is, if Wikipedia is right, that before his death he was about to tell the truth about Philadelphia, which he did not believe in. He did not believe Carousel, because he was trained in science and had a Master of Science but not a doctorate, so they incorrectly called him doctor, which was not a crime in those days. But maybe the doctor understood the disease by the symptoms and understood that the cover-up went deep into US intelligence. Maybe it involved the Manhattan Project and Einstein's theories. Maybe Land was a plant of the CIA, which is just brilliant because it explains Al Balik later on also being a plant and a straw man. Anyone who believes in some kind of experiment that is top secret is not crazy. But the CIA is not trying to cover up time travel experiments. Even though they are crazy enough to attempt time travel, it is more likely the real experiments involve a classical theory of everything, which quantum mechanics claims is impossible, but Einstein believed was possible. I will present my own classical theory of everything as an example of what they may be trying to cover up. Dirac's equation can be used to explain the orbit of electrons in any universe, including a big crunch. Electrons in 10 large special dimensions, and a contracting universe spiraling to the nucleus, and they form supermassive electrons when gravity overcomes repulsion between electrons. This can all be decided with classical mechanics and maybe Maxwell's equations. You don't need Heisenberg's uncertainty, because everything is not uncertain in a contracting universe. Entropy decreases and order increases, especially when contraction of space is faster than light. This is my original theory, but it explains how vast energies can be released by the annihilation of the charge of a proton, releasing binding energy when they become neutrons. Only a small difference in mass is necessary to produce a great deal of energy. This could mean an annihilation bomb, which could explain why they want to keep secret Einstein's unified field theory. But college lecturers keep this secret from their students, who have to learn how to do the job. Maybe the students are taught how to use this information to cover the truth, and that is just not science. It is not cricket, but it may be how things are done. There is no classical theory of everything, and that is unlikely. After 50 years of investigation. QM means that Heisenberg always applies even when the universe reverses its direction and its time. That is hard to believe. It is unlikely that there are no exceptions to Heisenberg and that the Big Crunch has not been favored as the explanation even though the equations balance for the Big Crunch and not for the Big Bang ex nihilo. What is the truth? It is somewhere between the two extremes. They can't cover up everything, but they can exercise control over the media. Like the BBC documentary that proposed Hawking's paradox meant the universe was not comprehensible. Maybe this led to unforeseen consequences and they got Hawking to change his mind. But Einstein is right, and that is what it means. If Hawking is wrong, you can have a classical theory of everything based on Hawking and Maxwell's equations. It is true that gravity can bend light, and it is true that electromagnetism can stand in for gravity. So would the US Navy want to build a destroyer that was invisible? The answer is yes, they would if they could. But they can't, so they won't. If they can, then they would keep on doing it. Because they would have invisible destroyers today. If the technical side is not impossible, then maybe the technology will be available in the future. And maybe they were able to make it work, but not repeat the experiment, because they did not know what went wrong, or either what went right. Alan was one of the last people to see Maurice K. Jessup alive. 2 days before his death, he had opportunity, he had motive, and the reason to kill since Jessup was going public with the truth about Philadelphia. That is, was an unorganized hoax. Why didn't Jessup's killer kill Alan as well, since it was all about showing up the truth about the experiment? Alan lived until 1995 in time to see Windows 95, which he probably said was alien technology. Anything for laugh, but he wanted to be taken seriously. Just like I want to be taken seriously as a rapper. The still small voice of the muse speaks to me, as long as there is not too much noise, and the future is today. That was the sign in the time machine. There is a lot of truth in that. The future is what we make it. What we sow today can change the future and hopefully make it a little better. But if we sow corruption, then how deep is that corruption? The answer to the question of whether the experiment really happened is one that depends on a land, and that is the case in the original book by Charles Berlitz. The original book says that the owner was after Jessup, and they had reason to believe that he knew about the land. The land had come to their attention when he sent Jessup's book, with animations speaking about the Philadelphia experiment and good and bad aliens. There is a relationship between aliens. They are not all friends. Some of them give us technology and some of them want to destroy us, and it isn't a bad hypothesis. But there are no aliens good or bad, in which case the experiment was not a result of alien technology, but the technology of the 1950s, which may not have been capable of making a ship invisible to radar, let alone make it travel through space. The ship is supposed to have traveled to Norfolk, which is over 100 miles, and appeared there and then returned to Philadelphia Harbor, but no one witnessed this at all, except the land was supposed to have seen it aboard the first. Was the land even aboard this ship is the million-dollar question. If he was, he still may not have seen anything, but something he heard was the trigger for his active imagination. And they have invisibility cloaks today, and they may have it is not the 1950s, but I have not seen any invisible ships, or at least, I have not heard any is the joke. So none exist. And of course, if they're invisible, then they still might exist. The explanation that the experiment was an accident, that is, was not intended to produce that result, and it could not be reproduced, so it is not real science. If you cannot repeat an experiment again and again, it is not science, but could be science fiction. Like cold fusion, something that was strange but could not be repeated. That does not mean cold fusion is not science. Some people say it does work and that they have repeated the experiment. It is the same with Philadelphia. There is evidence that the experiment was repeated with an aircraft in 1958 that was also called Project Rainbow. The evidence is circumstantial, as it was under the control of the CIA, and we can't be sure Wikipedia has it right. The whole thing is a mistake based on one man's idea of how to make himself famous, and that could be what I'm doing as well. I want to solve the experiment so they can make a movie. But Alan had heard rumors of an experiment, and he liked science fiction and UFOs because he read Jessup's book, and only fringe of people had read Jessup's book. It was not a popular novel, so he made the whole thing up. That is what he confessed to before he died. He's supposed to have told the magazine that the whole thing was a hoax, and that he acted alone. But the UNR involvement seems to have been real, so maybe he did not act alone. Maybe he was part of UNR and their man for the hour, and if he was their patsy, he kept the secret until he was old enough not to care, or they told him that circumstances had changed and they wanted to distance themselves from the story that has become Philadelphia. Maybe saner minds at the UNR prevailed, and they saw the dangers of all these people believing disinformation. They say the disinformation is to cover up time travel experiments that are real, but maybe some secret experiments and theories maybe not, involving time travel as the disinformation says. I don't really think they have. Boo.